completing the square. So this is another method for solving quadratic equations. And they don't often call it completing the square on the exam papers. More often what they do is they say that you need to transform your equation into something that looks like this. So brackets x plus a brackets squared plus b. Okay, so we're going to look at how to do this. It's not complex, it just takes a lot of steps, which isn't quite the same. Now the first thing we have to do is ensure that we've got our equation in the right format. And what do I mean by the right format? Well, the first thing we need is we need it to equal 0. So we need to take away 9 from both sides to make that happen. So that will turn it into 10x squared plus 20x minus 80 equals 0. Now the other thing that we need to do before we start is we can't have a number in front of the x squared for using this technique. So we need to divide through by this number. So we're going to divide everything by 10. So that will now change it to x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals 0. I mean, to be honest, even if you were going to use another method, that would be a smart thing to do, because why have those bigger numbers when you can have this much simpler equation? But it needs to be in this format, so it needs to be equal to 0, and it can't have a number in front of the x squared when you're doing this. So we're now going to start transforming this into something that looks like this. And the first stage is quite straightforward. So we're going to do this bit, the bracket. And so the bracket is going to be x. And how do we know what this a is going to be? This a is always going to be half of this middle term. Okay, we'll see why in a minute. So that means it's going to be plus 1. Not plus 1x, but half of this number in front here. So that is our squared bit to start with. So now we're going to expand that so that we can see what we've got and understand where we go next. So we've got x plus 1 times another x plus 1. So if we multiply this out, we've got x times x gives us x squared, x times 1 gives us x, 1 times x gives us x, and 1 times 1 gives us 1. And if we tidy that up, we've got x squared plus 2x plus 1. So now what we need to do is compare that to the equation we were given to start with. And what you can see is that we have, let me just underline this one so it's a bit more obvious. We've got the x squared right, and we've got the 2x right. And that's because we chose to half this. That's how that happens. But what's not right is the ending. We've got a different number here. So we need to know what we need to add or subtract to this, which is the same as this, to make it into this, because we're trying to transform all of this into this format. Okay, so that's kind of the completing part of the completing the square. So to go from 1 to minus 8, we're going to need to take away 9. So now it's about writing it in this format. So we've got this, which remember is just this. So we're going to write it that way, x plus 1 squared. But in order to make this the same as this, we have to take away an extra 9. So it's minus 9 equals 0. Now sometimes that's all you need to do, because sometimes the questions just ask you what the a would be and what the b would be. But I'm going to go on and show you how we now actually solve the equation. In other words, find out what x could be. And there's going to be two possible answers here. So the first thing we're going to do is add 9 to both sides. So that will give us x plus 1 squared equals 9. So now to get at that x, we're going to need to unsquare, which we call square rooting. So we're going to square root both sides. So on this side, we're going to have x plus 1. And on this side, this is crucial, we're going to have plus or minus 3. So the square root of 9 could either be plus 3 or it could be minus 3. If you think that through, if you square 3, you get 9. If you square minus 3, you get 9. So if we unsquare it, we don't know which of those two it was that started with. So this is how we're going to get our two answers. So the first one is x plus 1 equals plus 3. So taking away 1 from both sides, we can see that's going to give us x equals 2. And then the other version is going to be x plus 1 equals minus 3. So again, if we take away 1 from both sides, that's going to lead us to x equals minus 4. Okay, so I'm going to go through that process again for you. So here's our starting equation. It doesn't equal 0, so we've got to fix that. So I've got to add 2 to both sides. So that gives us x squared minus 20x, and if we add 2 on here, we're going to have 51 equals 0. Okay, we don't need to divide through because there's no number in front of the x this time, but just check and notice that it's there. So we're now, this is the equation we're going to be working with. So we're going to make our squared bracket. So remember, that's going to be x, and then the other part is going to be half of what's in front of the x term. So this is negative, so it's going to be negative here, so it's going to be minus 10 squared. So then if we multiply that out, I'm going to do this a bit faster this time, we're going to get x squared minus 10x minus 10x plus 100. And if we tidy that up, we're going to get x squared minus 20x plus 100. So you can see we've got the x bit squared bit right, and we've got the minus 20x, so it's just about getting this number right. How do we go from 100 to 51? We have to take away 49. So now we're going to write it in that format. So we're going to have our x minus 10 squared, and we have to take off 49 to make this equal to this. So that equals 0. So now we can solve it. So we're going to add 49 to both sides, which gives us this. We're going to square root. Remember, it's plus or minus 7. So the first answer is going to be x minus 10 equals 7. Adding 10 to both sides, that gives us x equals 17. And the other one is going to be x minus 10 equals minus 7. Again, we're adding 10 to both sides to solve that, so we get x equals 3. So that is how we do completing the square questions if we're going all the way through. Right, I'm just going to show you one last thing, which is quite a common thing for them to ask in the question. So here it says that this equation, or expression in this case, x squared plus px plus q, can be written in the format x minus 5 squared plus 31. And they simply are asking us what is p and what is q. So remember, when we're doing it the other way round, we halve this to put it in the brackets. So we need to double this to work out what p is. So p is 2 lots of minus 5, and so it's minus 10. Now the Q is far more obvious there, isn't it? Okay, so or at least we think it might be, but we need to expand these brackets. So we need to do our x minus 5, x minus 5 multiplying. So that's going to give us x squared. I'm going to jump a little bit. It's going to give us minus 10x in the middle. We know that. We've just worked that out. And on the end, it's going to be plus 25. Okay. So that's what the x minus 5 squared bit will give us. So to get the original q bit that was here, we're going to need to add on 31 to the 25. So that means we're going to get, so 31 and 25 added together is going to give us 56. So P is minus 10. And Q is 56. So it's just about reversing that process that we've just been looking at.